Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Deadlines to register for an economic impact payment are just around the corner. COVID tax tip 2020-126, September 25th, 2020. Federal benefit recipients who don't normally have a filing requirement but do have qualifying children must register by Wednesday, September 30th to receive a $500 catch-up payment per child. Other non-filers have until Thursday, October 15th to register for their economic impact payment. So you'll recall the economic impact payment is the stimulus payment, or there's going to be a benefit type of payment that's going to be going out in order to help people out during this time period of the COVID-19. It's attached to the 2020 tax return, basically, that's going to be filed in 2021. However, obviously they want to get it out now. Therefore, they based the information on either the 2019 tax return if filed or the 2018 tax return if filed. However, if people didn't file the tax return, maybe they didn't need to file the tax return because they're below a threshold of income in order to do so. The IRS was then trying to pick up those people by then picking up Social Security payments. So if people had Social Security payments or other government beneficiary payments, then the IRS would still pick it up and they would send out the money based on that information. Now, if the IRS picked up the economic impact payment based on something like Social Security payments when a tax return was not filed, then they would send out the basis of the $1,200 economic impact payment, and they would not have information in that circumstance for any qualifying children in that case. So if there were qualifying children, then they could have received another $500 per qualifying child. So if you're in that category, if you got a $1,200 economic impact check and you have a qualifying child under 17, dependent typically under 17 would be possibly a qualifying child, then you might be able to file in order to get the catch-up check. You have to do it before the September 30th deadline in order to get the catch-up check. If you don't file, you don't lose it by that point. But in order to pick up that $500, you would then have to file your tax return for 2021 or for 2020 in 2021 in order to pick that up. So they extended that to September 30th because they were trying to push it out before the original $1,200 economic impact checks went out originally, and then they pushed it out. Now they pushed it out to September for that catch-up payment. And then on October, for those people that have not received their economic impact payment yet, and they didn't file 2019, they didn't file 2018 because they're not required to, and they don't have any Social Security type payments that they're getting from the government, then the IRS may not know about them at all, and therefore they would not have sent out the economic impact payment when they may have been eligible to get one, and therefore you can use this tool in order to file with the IRS to let them know that, and then the IRS will basically send out the economic impact payment in those cases as well. So that's basically where we're standing at this point in time. So anyone using the non-filer tool, and that's the tool in order to file for the tax for this for the economic impact payment, can speed up the arrival of their payment by choosing to receive it by direct deposit. So if you use this tool and you have a direct deposit rather than a check, you would get the payment, of course, faster. They're trying to get everyone to do this direct deposit type of thing. Those who don't choose direct deposit will get a check. The deadline to claim a $500 payment for a qualifying child is Wednesday, September 30th, 2020. The deadline applies to individuals who didn't receive the $500 per qualifying child earlier this year when they received their own economic impact payment and who receive Social Security, retirement, survivor or disability benefits, supplemental security income, railroad retirement benefits, veteran affairs compensation, and pension, CNP benefits. So note that these are going to be individuals that the IRS probably didn't file a tax return for 2018 or 2019 because they weren't required to do so, but the IRS still knew about them because of these payments that are basically federal or government payments that are going out. So the fact that they know the payment information to go out, and they know that they're an individual and a citizen, or qualifying for an economic impact payment, means that they could just send out the basic payment, which was $1,200. So if they sent out the basic payment of $1,200 based on this information, the individual's receiving some kind of benefit on these, that would be one of these types of benefits, then they might have a qualifying child. If they had a qualifying child, they wouldn't have got the extra $500 in that case if there were a qualifying child, because the IRS didn't know about it because there was no tax return. They sent out the $1,200 economic impact payment based on this information. So that's the ones that's who they're looking for the September 30th deadline, to let them know about the qualifying child for the extra $500. So federal benefit recipients who can use the non-filer interpayment info here, there's a link to that tool here, to get a catch-up payment for a qualified child if they have not done one of the following. Already used the non-filer tool to provide information about the qualifying child. So if you already used it, then you should be okay. The IRS should have it. And if you do it twice, you're probably going to confuse the IRS. You don't want to confuse the IRS because, that usually makes things take longer. So file their 2019 or 2018 federal return. So if you filed your 2019 or 18 federal return, you don't want to use this tool, because this tool is for people who don't file or did not file that return, and for those who are not required to file. In other words, if you didn't file the 2019 or 2018 return because you just didn't do it and you're supposed to, then you don't want to use the tool either. You want to file the tax return, or else again you're going to kind of confuse the IRS, and that causes problems. So anyone who filed or plans to file a 2018 or 2019 tax return should not use this tool, and should file their tax return by October 15th, 2020 deadline. So again, if you're looking to get the economic impact payment, you didn't file 2018 or 2019, but you're required to, because your income's above the threshold in order to qualify to have to file, then you can't use the tool, because the tool is something that's kind of replacing the tax return for people that don't need to file the tax return. So again, in that case, you'd need to file the 2018 and or 2019 tax return. People who have already used the non-filer tool to provide info on children don't need to do anything else. The IRS will automatically make a payment to them in October. Thursday, October 15th, 2020 is the registration deadline to get an economic impact payment this year. Eligible individuals with little or no income who are not required to file a tax return may still qualify to receive an economic impact payment this year if they use the non-filer interpayment info here tool by October 15th, 2020. Anyone who misses either these deadlines will need to wait until next year to claim the payment as a credit on their 2020 federal income tax return. So in other words, if you miss these deadlines, it doesn't go away. It just means you got to wait longer, because the credit is actually tacked to or tied to the 2020 tax return, which is going to be filed in 2021 if you file the tax return. But obviously that would mean that if you miss these deadlines, you can't use the simplified tool, which is the non-filer tool, which should be easier than filing a tax return, and you should get the payment sooner. And if you miss that, then you got to file a tax return. And if you're in one of these categories, if you know someone in one of these categories, they don't need to file a tax return. So it might be a little bit more difficult to do so. I mean, you can file a tax return, but if their income is below the threshold, they haven't most likely been filing a tax return. And therefore, it could be a little bit more burdensome to file the tax return and wait for that to happen. So more information, economic impact payment eligibility, frequently asked questions, FAQs, there's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.